There we go. We're glad to have you with us today, and welcome to this educational program on understanding the investor mindset. At the bottom of your screen should be a chat icon and a Q&A icon. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Looks like a few of you have done that already, so that's great. Okay, and if you have a question for the speaker during the presentation, please use the Q&A box, and we'll do Q&A at the end of the presentation. So to get us started, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. OBI and Otrati would like to acknowledge the land we're all on, wherever we may be. Otrati conducts business throughout Portland and beyond, and is making an effort to acknowledge the history of the area and work towards decolonization of the bioscience industry. Portland rests on traditional village sites of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapoya, Molalla, and many other tribes who have made their homes along the Columbia River. So please join us in acknowledging the land we're all on throughout Oregon and beyond. And to learn more about Portland's native, diverse, and vibrant community, please read Leading with Tradition, a document created by the Portland Indian Leaders Roundtable, and there will be a link to it in the chat box shortly. So before we get started, I would like to introduce Michael Kilgore from First Republic Bank. First Republic Bank is a sponsor of today's event. We certainly appreciate their support of the OBI and our programming. And so I'm going to turn the microphone over to Michael to talk about First Republic Bank. Michael, please take it away.
Thank you for the introduction, Renee. I appreciate the opportunity to sponsor today's Lunch and Learn and listen to what Peter has to share. I apologize in advance. I am a breakthrough COVID statistics, so I'm on the trailing end of that, so I may be a little hoarse, but I'll power through. I've been fortunate enough to tour the OBI facility several times over the years, usually with Bill Newman keeping me from popping into a secure room. I'm sad that we're not there meeting right now overlooking the Willamette River, but you know, a virtual sandwich tastes just as good, right? Anyway, looking forward to Peter's presentation. The topic of funding is certainly relevant to me in the banking world, not to mention how capital intensive what you all are doing, all your enterprises. I do work with many local VCs and venture-backed startups, bioscience companies, and understand the life cycle of funding, research and development, product commercialization, regulatory compliance, scaling, on and on. You know, the time to market can just be brutal in what you do, and obviously funding is really important to that. A little about First Republic. We are a private bank and wealth management company. Our singular focus is to provide our clients with world-class service, and we put them in the center of all that we do. We are quietly a pretty big bank. We've been around for over 35 years and have been consistently growing around 20% per year. And despite being one of the 20 largest banks in the country, we operate like a local community bank. And we actually only have 80 offices coast to coast, including 2 in the Portland area. Those offices have just about every area of banking that you could want. And so even in Portland, we have mortgage lending, business banking, construction lending, online banking support, wealth advisory services and brokerage, financial planning, corporate trust services, and even foreign exchange services, which is often something that's really overlooked for bioscience companies, particularly if you have research partners and investors overseas. So that's something we excel at. Each office operates like a bank within the bank. We make decisions locally and quickly. And this really is the key to our high-touch service model. We don't hide behind a 1-800 number. Every client has a banker, and that banker knows you and understands your business. When you need something, you call me. I give you my cell phone. You can reach me. When you get a hold of me, you don't have to tell your story over and over again, unless you really just want to practice your pitch, as Peter will cover. We also have the technology to make banking from anywhere incredibly easy and convenient. We're particularly fond of the life science companies. And in addition to your standard deposit and treasury management services to increase efficiencies and savings, we actually have a dynamic and growing suite of products and services that we've negotiated with companies like AWS, Google Cloud, bookkeeping, recruiting services, Salesforce, the ever popular Zoom nowadays. And we actually have an amazing offer right now with TriNet, not to be confused with TriMet. TriNet is a PEO payroll service and HR provider. And if you're using TriNet or looking to add a payroll service provider, we have to talk, because this deal is just simply too good to pass up. With that, I could certainly go on. I've been with the bank for 10 years and I'm still drinking the Kool-Aid. We like to say that we do spike the Kool-Aid, but we're still drinking it. So anyway, thank you for the time here and this opportunity. I like to say it's a privilege and a partner to partner with Otrati and OBI, and I'd welcome any and all questions you might have about First Republic, or really just to be a general banking resource for you as well. Happy to connect. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Appreciate it. Go to the next slide. Okay, so now it's time to introduce our speaker, Dr. Peter Schuerman. He has 20+ years of experience in business development in biotech, agricultural biofuels. Oops, my slide just went away.
Should I take it from there, Renee?
Technology. No,
Oh.
I'm gonna finish your bio real quick. Sorry about that. Peter has 20 years of experience in business development in biotech, agriculture, biofuels, pharmaceuticals, nanotechnology, chemistry, and mechanical and electrical engineering. And he's a specialist in working across a wide spectrum of technologies. His business expertise includes negotiation, intellectual property management and licensing, public and private partnerships, coaching startups, team formation, ideation, lean innovation, customer discovery, grant writing, business model innovation, and intentional network development. He's the CEO and co-founder of Secret Agenda Art. It's an online arts community that's reimagining an inclusive marketplace for art in the 21st century. We're pleased to have him with us here today, and he is also one of our OBI mentors. So please welcome Peter for today's presentation. And if you have questions for him, please type it into the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. So Peter, if you're ready, please take it away.
I will. Thank you, Renee. Really, thank you very much to both you and Heather for hosting me, and also thanks to Michael and First Republic Bank for supporting this. I'm excited to be able to speak with you all about what I've distilled from working with innovators for the last couple of decades, as they are bringing something that has never existed before to the marketplace. It's a campaign, and to achieve the goals of any campaign, you need funding, and to not only figure out how you're going to arrive at your destination, but how you're going to stay there as well. So that's what I want to focus on today, is figuring out how to make that communication, that make a meaningful communication with people who could be supporters of what you do. So that means understanding the investor mindset. So what I'll be talking about is these four topic areas. We'll talk about like trust work, which is kind of a framework for understanding what it is we have to achieve when we're connecting with an investor. I'll also be talking with you about the startup investors hierarchy of needs, a model for what it is venture investors are looking for that just kind of summarizes it, distills it all, so it makes it easy for you to think about how you develop your pitch. Then we'll talk about framing your pitch, like how you take what you got and communicate it effectively. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can polish it, because there's an art to presenting your story. So I want to kick it off by asking the question, what is the role of venture investors? It seems like some people might think this is obvious, but I've encountered a lot of misconceptions. What people will often tell me, especially if they're just new to the game of entrepreneurship, is that they say, you know, angel investors are there, you know, they can write smaller checks and they're there to help you when you're just getting started. And then VCs, you know, they're there when you have, you know, you've gotten further along and it's time for you to really take off and you're going to need a lot of money to do that. And if that sounds at all correct, I just really want to change your mind about that, because that's not the way to think about it. And I think that this comes from people, particularly coming from an academic background, where there are grant funding agencies that are there to provide funding for different types of research. But venture investors, that's not why they are there. They're not there to help you. It's not that they can't help you, but that's not their raison d'etre, right? They're not there. They're not a function of society, not a part of society that's their job, is to fund you. And, you know, I remember having this conversation with a postdoc who was starting a company with his mentor, and brilliant guy, right? I mean, he had a PhD in his field. And so we were in the business incubator talking about how to work with investors, and he just wasn't getting it. And I was trying to figure out why it was, you know, what concept he had, what were his misconceptions. So I said, let's go grab some food. So we went to the dining commons, and we're continuing to talk. And he has this breakthrough. He says, okay, Peter, I think I get it. What you're saying is, with investors, it's their money. So they're the ones that decide whether or not they're going to fund something. And I said, exactly. Now, that seems like it would be a pretty obvious concept, but it was a breakthrough. And I think that we have to be really aware that they're not there to give funding for someone who is worthy, that they're there to try to get a return on investment, right? And this is just a pervasive misconception. I think that people get, you know, you go to school for years, you go to your teacher and you say, look what I did, and they reward you. We just want to realize that investors are not thinking the same way. So what are investors looking for? They want to arrive at a point where they can say, I like this, and I trust you, and this is going to work for me. So I like this is a tricky one for us to control. Like it's, you know, people will have an initial reaction, maybe followed up with subsequent reactions. And this can be very affected by, you know, just how respectfully you engage with people, how, you know, just basic social skills, following etiquette. I mean, these are the kinds of things that create that kind of connection. I trust you is what we are going to be focusing a lot on today, because this is the one that's perhaps the most difficult. This will work for me is something along the lines of, you know, like, this is the size of investment that I want to make. This is the kind of deal that I want to invest in. So if you have a pharmaceutical deal, but you're going to someone who is focusing on clean tech, this will probably not work for them. But so that's the third one. So that is just a matter of, you want to get that right. You just have to really understand that the connection between what it is you are trying to pitch and the audience. So we'll be focusing mostly on how you get to that point of trust. So how do investors decide? Like, what's the anatomy of that investment decision? And we can boil it down to 5 things. Investors are trying to figure out if you have compatible values. They're trying to figure out if the team is a good team, if it's going to play, if you've got the right type of people in the right types of roles, that they can work with each other, and that they can work well with others. Desirability. This is about, you know, has the company hit upon a really interesting opportunity that the market will pay for. Feasibility is about, you know, technical capability of the company being able to get where it's going. And then finally, viability. Can the company survive once they get there? Like, can they make it in a sustainable way? So that means that we've thought through a business model that can support your business for the long term. So some people might be familiar with this. This may seem like a bit of a sidebar, but it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Abraham Maslow, a psychologist who pointed out that humans have a whole spectrum of needs, but the ones at the bottom of this diagram are the most important. So if your physiological needs, like the need for food and water, aren't being met, it doesn't, trying to do things, to meet your social needs, like, meeting new people and making friends, right? It's hard to appreciate and your social needs and meet your social needs when your physiological needs, your safety needs are lacking. So the thing is, if someone needs their physiological needs met and also, has other needs, the first thing you want to focus on is physiological needs. So that's a hierarchy of needs. And this model, which I call the startup investors hierarchy of needs, is something that I created together with a venture investor, an angel named Jamie Rhodes. We just had a kind of a fortuitous opportunity to work side by side back when we were both at Texas A&M. Very unusual for an angel investor to do this, but he was curious. He was curious about what was going on inside of universities. And I took that as an opportunity to ask him the question, how do you make decisions? And he said, I'd love to tell you, Peter, but I don't know how to explain it. So we got in front of a whiteboard and we built this. And I've taken this to Angel Capital Association meetings and I've said, let me ask you, is this how you make decisions? And every single time the answer has been, yeah, this is how we do it. So if you want to see a little bit more about this, there's a URL there at the bottom. But let's go through it step by step. So again, mindset, this is going to be the most important thing. So this means that even if you have like an amazing product, but if there's a problem with mindset, you're not going to be able to get a typical investor interested. So mindset is about the difference between trying to get paid and rewarded for what you have done in the past. Like, for instance, I came up with this really good idea and this really amazing business plan. Do you want to fund it? Sounds like someone trying to get a grade on their report, right? Like, that's not what investors are looking for. They're not looking to give you a grade. They're not your teacher. So what is it they're looking for? They're looking for someone who's saying, yes, I mean, we've done all this work, but here's what we can do next. It's very forward thinking. It's saying, we're here, we want to move forward, and we would love to get your help doing this, because as we're going to show you, it's definitely a good place that we're trying to get to, and you could be part of that. So I've seen entrepreneurs fail at getting funding and have it hinge on this question where an angel says to them, so what do you want to use the money for? Which is, if it's not clear, that's already a problem. But the entrepreneur might say something like, well, I've been doing without a salary for a long time, so I need to really pay myself. That's looking backwards. There's nothing wrong with actually paying yourself, but you want to talk about what you're going to do with that money going forward, as opposed to, the angels don't want to come in here and pay you for the work you did, because they're not your teacher, they're not your boss. The next thing is the team. So mindset and team together is powerful. This is probably something like 70% of the value that you could be bringing to someone as you're making a pitch. The team has to be something that functions internally as well as externally. And so, the three functions that need to be present in a company are the CEO's function, what the CEO does, what the CTO, the technology officer, does, what the chief marketing officer does. These are functions. This doesn't mean that every team has to be 3 people. It could be any number of people, as long as these roles are clearly shared and all of them are covered. So that means that, for instance, we might look at Apple. Steve Wozniak would have been the CTO and Steve Jobs would have been the CEO and the CMO at the very beginning, right? And so Steve Jobs was covering both of those functions. But it doesn't have to be divided that way. It can be divided lots of different ways, but you just don't want to have one of these areas missing. And you don't also want someone who is the wrong person to be in that role. So what I've seen a lot of is someone who really loves living in that CTO mindset, operating as the CEO. And what happens is the company ends up being just one long R&D project, because the CTO is not adopting a CEO mindset. Or similarly, you might have someone who has a CMO, a chief marketing officer mindset in the CEO position, fails to embrace the CEO mindset, and then you get just something that's all a bunch of hype. So you get something like the Fire Festival, which is and the difference is that CTOs focus on exploring what's possible. CMOs focus on what is needed and how you're going to connect with people. And CEOs focus on how can we deliver. And so the intersection of these three spheres of influence, these spheres of activity, is what the startup does. Now, it's not enough to just make sure that all these people are getting along with each other, and they have to. And this is why there shouldn't be any duplication of effort. There shouldn't be any overlap, because that creates collisions. But it's also important that this team be able to communicate with others outside of the organization, because none of us is as smart as all of us. And so if I'm investing in a team, I want to know that they aren't going to think getting help from other people is cheating. Again, it's not school, it's real life. So a network-enabled team that has good internal function is hard to beat. So we're going to take a look at the three layers that sit on top of team and mindset. And so market engagement maybe gets us to 80%. If all of this is good, we've got like, a pretty good opportunity. Market engagement, and that's the CMO question, is, have we really figured out what people want? Is this something that people will pay for, that they will value? It's not answering the question yet about whether it can be delivered or whether it's technically feasible. It's just understanding the need in exquisite detail. That's why you need to have a good CMO, because someone has to be focusing on, that has to be what they're all about. The technology, and I've crossed it out because investors aren't as interested in technologies as they are in products. Products are what happen when technologies come into contact with the market. So the CTO working with the CMO productizes technology. And so that has to be very strong as well. And then finally, there is this somewhat abstract concept of positioning. And this is what CEOs do. CEOs position. For instance, even internally, the connection between the chief technology officer and the chief marketing officer, and people who think like that, has to be something that is mediated. As it turns out, chief technology officer types, chief marketing officer types, tech and marketing people tend to be a bit allergic to each other. So it is important to create an environment where they are both respected and appreciated, and where we don't get this phenomenon of hand waving going on. So what often happens is, if you talk to a technical person and you say, well, how are you going to sell it? They go, oh, well, we'll just, and then wait a minute, what's this? What is this hand waving? Or if you say to a marketing person, it's like, well, how how do you think we can develop that type of product? And he said, well, just get in the lab. And it's like, again, what is this? What is this hand waving? This is not very respectful to sort of condense what someone else does as if it can be done as easily as hand waving, or be dismissive that way. So these are the kinds of things that you want to see, that the team is cohesive. And so when I've seen people get up and do a pitch and they start arguing with each other. It's like, well, try again, because no one's going to invest in a company that can't manage to stop fighting long enough to give a pitch. So obviously this would be amazing, right? So if you had all these in the green, all those boxes checked, again, angel investors, it's their money. They get to do what they want to do. All venture capitalists, all venture investors, they're going to do what they're going to do. But this would make a compelling opportunity. It would be something that you could trust. But what I typically see is someone who says, we just had this breakthrough in the laboratory. We just need to file a patent to be able to establish a position. And then we are just needing some introductions to some investors. And I'm like, well, I do know some investors, but I like the idea of them returning my calls, right? So if I introduce you to them, they might not return my calls in the future. And so IP, I should mention this, positioning is not just about people, but it's also about excluding others. So for instance, positioning could be achieved by getting real estate on the intellectual property landscape. So getting patent rights, either filing a patent or licensing a patent. Positioning can be created through making strategic connections with others, like supply chain entities, like having a unique or exclusive supply chain agreement, or through market channel development, having a unique market channel that is made from exclusive relationships with distributors. Anything that makes it hard for others to recreate what it is you're doing are all about positioning, because positioning is ultimately trying to get to an opening in the marketplace that exists. That's what the campaign of your startup is about, is getting to that position. And so that's why CEOs focus so much on that. So yeah, most companies unfortunately look like this, and we can use this model as a way to do some repair. This is the approach I take when I'm incubating companies. So, which of these is better? On the left, you've got at best a B team with an A opportunity, perhaps. And then on the right side, you have, an A team with a B opportunity at the best, and it's really the one on the right. It's the one on the right. I've seen companies like the one on the right that say, yep, we were able to communicate their forward thinkingness, that had a great team who'd been around the block and who had found an amazing opportunity by identifying a gap in the marketplace. And then the question is, well, how are we going to develop it? And they had a plan. They did not have a technology, nor did they have a product, but they had a plan for creating one. And then they had a plan for creating the position that they would be developing. And in this particular case, the company got $5 million in investment. Whereas on the left, most startups look like this and they don't get any investment. So that's the startup investors' hierarchy of needs. That's a blueprint for creating an opportunity that would be investable. So, but it's not enough just to have an investable startup. You have to be able to communicate it. And so how do you frame your pitch? So on the left in this table, there are some examples of framings that don't work. The first is education. So, education is appropriate anytime someone has decided to pay tuition. Education is appropriate if your parents are making you go to school, but it's not good for anything else, right? Education requires an opt-in, someone saying, yes, I came here to learn. And investors aren't motivated to be students or teachers. They are motivated to be investors. Good ones are going to approach this as investors. So don't educate, right? That's like, don't think of it as, if they understand this, then they will give us money. That's not it. Also, you don't want to convert people. Sometimes people are very excited about their opportunities. Say, I'm excited about this, I'm passionate, and by the end of this presentation, you're going to be a believer too. Like, that's not typically what investors are looking for, is, to be converted to a new way of believing and a new way of living. I mean, they're going to be happy for you to be in, running the company, but they're not necessarily needing to drink the Kool-Aid and become part of what you're doing. And so, and then the final one is reporting things, just saying, oh, I'm going to give them the facts. I'm just going to lay out all the data. I'm going to put a lot of Excel spreadsheets into my presentation so they just can see what a compelling opportunity this is. This also doesn't work. So what does work is, right, so this is someone who's never heard of you before, doesn't know what your deal is. You have to describe your vision. You have to be able to help them understand where you're trying to go, what the campaign is directed towards. You want to use a narrative structure. You want to tell a story that allows the investor to see themselves as part of this story, as enabling the story. And you want to make it clear to the investor how you're going to get where you're trying to go. So if you are taking that approach, you should arrive at, your typical 10 or so slides that, there's not only one way to do this, but you can find formats where there's roughly 10 slides that will help you talk about it, your story. But what you have to recognize is that each slide in your deck is valuable real estate, right? There's a very limited number of slides. And so you can use each slide to deliver a message, what that is about, but it's also subsidiary messages that can be delivered as well. So you can inject information about values, people, desirability, feasibility, and viability in various slides, but don't try and put all of them in. Just try to put a few in. And the reason is that people believe things and they trust things much more if they piece them together. So if you just say to someone, here's what you should believe, there's going to be resistance. But if you give them various pieces of information and data that they can assemble in their own mind and come to that conclusion, arrive at that belief, they'll trust it because it was homegrown. It was manufactured on site as opposed to being something that you came up with. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're talking about the product as one of your slides. So this might be an opportunity to say, we're really excited about this product because it's all based on a really amazing insight that Henrietta, our chief marketing officer, discovered. She talked to countless, like a couple hundred of potential customers. And what she found is about 80% of the time, they were all struggling with this thing that we had never heard of. But she was able to figure that out. And anyway, so when she figured that out, we all powwowed together, said, can we actually deliver something that solves this problem? And the answer was yes. So that story that could be overlaid and told at the same time as you're showing the product slide is starting to talk about the people, right? So you're starting to show that there's a team here. They like working together. And it also shows that desirability has been thoroughly investigated. So as you just look at each slide, it's like, how can we talk about our values, people, desirability, feasibility, viability? How can we add to this so that there's more pieces for the investor to put together. So that's the presentation I wanted to share with you today. So we talked about like, trust, and work, and how investors need to get to that point where they can say that they do like something, that they trust it, and it's going to work for them. We talked about the startup investors hierarchy of needs, and if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the negotiatethefuture.com website, or I have a blog. We talked about framing the pitch, which is about helping people understand the story and how they can be a part of it, and how you can give them all the pieces that allow them to put together in their own mind their beliefs and their trust in the opportunity. And with that, let's wrap it up and see if anyone has any questions. So I'm taking a look at the questions right now. We've got the first one, which I'll just read. It says, in today's view of the world, how important is it now for VCs and investors to have a diverse capital? Are investors intentionally looking for diverse companies with a diverse cap table that offer different products and services that traditionally have not been given an opportunity to pitch? Great question from an anonymous attendee. The answer is, if it's an angel, the question was about VCs, but if it's an angel, if the angel is like, yes, that's important to me, then certainly. And there are, of course, all kinds of angels who invest for all kinds of reasons. So absolutely. But you want to know your audience. You want to look for people who are sending that kind of signal. When it comes to VCs, it really depends on what they were telling people when they were raising their fund. I mean, if that was what they were pitching, then absolutely, that the venture fund is making a promise to its investors that they are going to find diverse opportunities to invest in. So I hope that answers the question. I think there's a little place to click a thumbs up, like I just did. So if anyone else feels like that answered the question, they can do that. Let me go ahead and answer the next question. While pitching a VC, would you have a slide regarding the exit strategy? Absolutely. I think that that's really important, because one way to think of your company is that you're figuring out how to deliver value to customers so that your company now becomes itself a valuable product, which could be delivered to, for instance, another company through an M&A. Or if you want to talk about, how you're planning to go IPO, that's fine too. But yes, the investor, this very much, it's very important, because this again speaks to helping the investor get what they're looking for, which is a return on their investment. And I see a note here, Renee Miller would like to answer this question live. So I'm not sure what that means, but Renee? Okay, so if there is something that we should be doing differently, let me know. I see the next question, and that was from Guillaume Lenormand. So thank you, Guillaume, for that question. And Nissa Bartolome asks, what are good questions to ask when interviewing a potential CEO for a brand new startup? This is really, really good topic. So, and I just got a note that Renee's computer is frozen. So best wishes to Renee. I'm sure she'll be back with us shortly. That's a very short question, but with a very long answer, Anissa. I think what you are looking for is someone who can convince you that you would want to invest your time and the company that you've created with them. So in other words, they should be able to pitch you in much the same way that we've talked about today. So they should be able to knock you. They should be able to knock you out with, how they describe this campaign and how they're going to take this company to its final destination and hold that territory when they get there. The next question here is from Tuan Thamdo, and he or she, I'm sorry, I'm just not sure, asks, could you talk about when the right timing to engage investors would be? And it depends, first of all, on how well you know them. So if you have a friendly relationship with an investor, you could talk to them earlier and you could say, hey, you don't go to them and say, hey, I'm looking for money. You could say, hey, I'm looking for advice. Actually, looking for advice is an amazing tool because typically when you ask for money, you get advice. So if you ask for advice, sometimes you get money. And so I would say, if you can build some informal relationships with investors where you could ask them for advice, or you could use asking advice as a way to build relationships with those investors. You could do that really any time that you think you can have a mutually interesting conversation. But when you want to talk to investors about like investing, it's when you have a way of convincingly talking about your mindset, your team, your market engagement, your product, and how you've positioned yourself, right? So once you have all of those, yeah, I mean, you should begin. And someone, Jürgen Vollrath, says he's going to be reconfiguring his pitch deck. So that is exactly the kind of thing I'm hoping to help people with. So Jürgen, thanks for that feedback. How would you reach out to investors when you lack an existing relationship? This is something Jürgen's also asking. Asking for advice. The thing is, you want to build your network before you need it. And I actually coach people in the process of like how to have conversations with people, how to build networks. So that's a big topic, but what I would say is curiosity beats intelligence. So what you want to do is have questions that you're trying to answer and then start building networks around those questions. So you can say, hey, I'm starting this company and we just have a big question about like, what would be the best way to engage this particular market segment? We have some thoughts, would love to get your feedback. And the thing is, about 96% of people are awesome. Like you can just reach out, you can find people on LinkedIn and ask for advice. And people are busy, but like if you do this consistently and you think about people you already know and you start asking for help, and then when you talk to them, ask them if they know anyone else that you can talk to, you can rapidly build a network and you can basically think with other people's brains. And connectional intelligence is awesome. Like when I think about all the most amazing things that I've ever experienced or done, it's all been because of connectional intelligence. And then looks like we have another question from Anissa. Is it more advantageous to bring in an outside CEO, CTO, or CMO for a brand new startup, or assign these roles to existing founding members of the company? Also an awesome question that probably requires more time than we've got here. But what I would say that, like, let's say you're a startup of one person. Well, then you are all three of them. You are responsible for all of these. And you want to bring people in to kind of pick up the slack where you feel like it's not your specialty. And so, and what I would say is that since this is something you're creating and it's just so personal that if you like, I would be very leery of just thinking of it as a hiring decision. This should be like, the startup that I've launched this year, secretagenda.art. I started talking to people last October, and there's these two individuals that I just really loved, and we've ended up becoming co-founders. And in other words, take your time. Like right now, I know they have my backs. I know they know I have theirs, and we're really different. So it takes time for people who are really different to figure out how to work together. And so, yeah, it's don't think of it as hiring. Think of it as finding someone you want to collaborate with. And then it looks like, I think we have time for one last question. Josh Souter says, what resources are available for entrepreneurs to take advantage of in order to develop and refine their pitches prior to engaging investors? So I would say the most powerful thing you can do is find people who you can get feedback from, who aren't going to feel like they have to be polite. Sometimes people get into pitch competitions in order to get feedback on their pitches. And I would say you have to be really careful about that. I've seen, like I was telling Renee before we got started today, I saw an example of 5 companies at a pitch competition pitching to a panel of VCs. And I just ranked them. I said, okay, this is the best one, and second, third, fourth, fifth. And I swear the VCs ranked them the other way. They said the nicest things about what I thought was the worst opportunity, and they were the most critical of the one that was the best. Why is that? It's because they're potential buyers. So if you're not interested in buying something, just be polite. Oh yeah, that was great. Keep at it. You're doing wonderful. And it was not useful advice. And then for the ones where they're like, maybe we want to invest in this. It's like, well, you might want to manage your expectations. You still have some big problems, but maybe we could meet and have lunch and talk about this, right? Because you're not going to go into the grocery store and say, man, this apple is amazing. I'd pay 5 times as much for it. They're buyers, right? So they're not going to give the same kind of feedback that someone who is just on your side of the table, so to speak, would give you. So just please keep that in mind. There is a whole psychology overlaid, a buyer psychology overlaid over all of these things. And then there's one that we could probably answer really quickly here. Do we need an NDA with the investors before pitching? I would say, first of all, investors don't want to do this because now it creates an obligation, and they see a lot of pitches and they don't want to ever be accused of violating an NDA. So you have to create a pitch that you can talk to people about without violating, without sharing any confidential information.
All right, thank you so much, Peter, for your time. As you all know, Renee's computer is having some issues, so I'm going to wrap up the webinar today. I'm Sarah, I'm the admin assistant at the OBI. Just want to thank you all for coming. Our next virtual happy hour is November 4th. You can find a full calendar program of all of our events on the OBI website. And until then, I'd like to thank both Peter and Michael and everybody for attending. Thank you all for coming. Look for the recording in your email tomorrow, and we hope to see you all at our next event very soon. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.